The CFP released their latest rankings, but does it really matter more than Friday's game?
You are Locked On Georgia Tech, your daily podcast on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, guys? Welcome into Locked On Georgia Tech. I am one of your hosts, Caleb Johnson. I wasn't smart enough to get into Georgia Tech, but I am smart enough to talk about Georgia Tech football, taking this daily journey, covering the Yellow Jackets. Alongside with me is my co-host, Jarvis Davis, who's been covering Atlanta sports for the last 15 years. We want to start off by saying thank you for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. We're free and available wherever you download your podcast and wherever you go to download them. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Today on the show, we'll get into how does Mercedes-Benz Stadium change the feel of Friday's rivalry game? What about the Georgia Bulldogs can be exploited? But first, Jarvis, is Georgia Tech playing for their season on Friday based on everything that's led up to this point and what is potentially beyond Friday's game?
Yeah, when you think about the national perspective, it obviously is low. When you get dropped down, to 23 on the college football playoff rankings, that's the college football playoff committee like, yep, exactly what we thought. We had that conversation about, justifying the reservations that they were having, or they're justified. The reservations they were having about this team being justified, by their loss to Pitts. But I think that when you think about the way this team has been playing, specifically on the defensive side of football, and I've made a case for the offensive side, getting off to some super slow starts. I just think from a mental standpoint, that's what's on the line on Friday, right? Because you had a bad game. You lost against NC State. You had to pull one out your behind against Boston College, and you just straight up embarrassed yourself for at least the first 15 minutes of that game against Pitt. So when you think about that almost going on a month worth of playing football, you have to be at a mental space where, like, man, we have to have a good game. And if we don't have a good game against the team up 3-16, then there are going to have to be some conversations where you're like, okay, maybe we don't have what we need when it comes to figuring out things when stuff isn't going our way.
Yeah, I think part of this for me, Jarvis, is a loss on Friday would just be quite the ultimate disappointment to the season, because you were at a point of 8-0, and like, okay, this thing, maybe we get to this week and Georgia Tech's undefeated or has one loss. And so I think to leave this and to finish the season 9-3, you would go, all right, that was a decent year, much improved from what's happened the season before, and certainly the season before that. It would just be a little bit of a like, man, like, for all of the hype and everything, the discussion, it would feel like the Haynes for Heisman campaign would be so long in the dust, quite honestly,
Right.
just from like all of the hype that was around this program, and rightfully so. And you pinpointed something there that is very likely, potential conversation for us in the coming days, of just a self-evaluation of, hey, maybe when you did get to 8-0, the wins were covering up some sizable holes that you've had on this team that you kind of just managed to deal with. And certainly, injuries play a part in things. Of course, we mentioned before, Jai Gilmore going down and now being out for the season. That doesn't help you in any way, shape, or form. It's just, I think there is something to the rivalry of this game means something more when you're on the side that hasn't won since 2016. When you're on the side that I believe I saw, this is the 8th consecutive year where the Yellow Jackets are double-digit underdogs. They, our friends over at FanDuel, have them as 13.5-point underdogs in this game. And so it's one of those, I feel like you don't want to find yourself in the position of just having that level of disappointment. And to your point, the discussions that we've had previously of like proving the committee wrong. I think, this team, I know, would like to prove something to themselves and just to the state of Georgia of like, hey, we are here to compete. And maybe this year we're not competing for a national championship, like that team over there is, but we certainly, you want that ability in recruiting when you go to this offseason, all of those sorts of things, to have this win be there. And so
let me just say this, though, when it comes to how it's one thing to say, okay, you want to prove other people wrong, but you want to prove that you were right.
Yeah,
you want to prove that you believe within yourself that you can do this thing. You want to prove that A&O wasn't a fluke. You want that's what, those are the thoughts that are coming through their minds right now, or what should be coming through their mind, because this is it means something when you have a guy who was in conversation to be up for the Heisman. It means something when you have your kicker, Aiden Burr, who was a finalist for one of 3 finalists for the Luke Rosa Award. Those national recognition means that you're doing the right thing. People are paying attention to you. People have eyeballs on you. They understand what you're trying to build. But then as soon as you get those eyeballs, i.e. being 8-0, and then you start to shrink in those moments by having a bad loss, a bad win, and a bad loss to Pitt. So I'm speaking in committee terms right now. So
right.
I'm not trying to confuse anyone, but I'm speaking in committee terms. But all of those things have been happening. It's a snowball effect, and something has to be done in order to stop it. And like I said earlier, if you aren't able to stop it, you're probably going to end up in the Holiday Bowl playing against Arizona State. Yay, I guess. So, but yeah, man, there's a lot at stake. Yeah, pride's on the line. Ego on the line. Man, am I not as good as I thought I was? Those are some of the questions some players are probably asking themselves. So I feel like this is the game where if you can't figure out a way to play up to your competition, if you can't figure out a way to get yourself mentally ready, have the best week of practice that you've ever had in the entire season, it ain't gonna happen at this point.
Yeah, and speaking of the practice element, I have found it interesting that for this week in particular, media not allowed to watch any of the actual practice going on. It's been all about, we'll let you watch stretching, the guys getting ready. So it makes me wonder, of course, Brent Key spoke, last week about getting in live tackling and how that would help things. I wonder what new element potentially that Brent Key is bringing to the table for this game that I have to imagine, based on how last year went, knowing that you took them right up to the edge of being able to pull that game off, literally to where you're making up plays on the sidelines essentially for 2-point conversions. I wonder what tricks are up Brent Key, Buster Faulkner, Blake Gideon, for that matter. What's up their sleeve, what they can potentially, try to pull off for a game that certainly, if you win, Jarvis, I think this could massively change the outlook of the season when obviously, the alternative is a bit more doom and gloom. But when it specifically comes to the Bulldogs, what about that team up 3-16 can actually be exploited? Because they're a really good football team right now. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets from everything of who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Now, unfortunately for the Hawks, playing the lowly Wizards, there was no comeback in hand for that one. And you also had Dyson Daniels not get his go without a steal for the first time in 70 games. But normally there is plenty of really positive Hawks action you can get in on whoever your favorite NBA team is. FanDuel keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We want to thank you guys for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Jarvis, that team up 3-16, I mean, Georgia Bulldogs, they have not played a bad game in a month, essentially, if you want to count that game down in Jacksonville as one where they certainly didn't come out the way that, people would have expected against a team that just fired their head coach. For this matchup, though, against Georgia Tech, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of areas where the Yellow Jackets have the upper hand, but there's a few. They still exist.
Yes, absolutely. Every team has weaknesses. It's just all about being able to exploit them. And of course, with the best element of this team being the offense, with your Heisman candidate, was a Heisman candidate, still a Heisman candidate.
I don't think so.
No, not
unfortunately, Jarvis. I think
Heisman candidate.
I think the guy who is going to be starting quarterback across the way is a more realistic Heisman candidate at this point.
At this point, I can't disagree with you. But here's the thing: a really good offense, at one point, the best offense in the country.
Yeah.
One of the highest scoring teams in this conference. I look at where the Bulldogs and how efficient they are in rushing the passer, and they're awful. They are 112th in the country. As a matter of fact, that defense that everybody been ranting and raving about, on the other side of the football, they have more sacks than Georgia. Georgia has 16 sacks on the season. So I think that when you look at how you can exploit Georgia, it has to be in the passing game. I understand the basis of this. The basis of this offense is to run the football with your quarterback and your running back, right? And just pound people. That's how you know this offense has been humming. If this offense has success running the football, it's gonna be a long day for the people on the other side of the ball. But I think in this game, you're going to have to lean on Malik Rutherford, Eric Rivers, Isaiah Canyon, very much so. I would love to see those guys, all three of those guys out on the field at the same time, because you want to have those explosive guys that can get open, guys that can beat man coverage, because at some point, Glenn Schumann is going to send pressure. And based off of what we saw last week against Pitt, they put that on tape against Pitt last week that they can't handle that. The offensive line, Key called those guys out, saying, "Hey, man, we got to protect better." And now that it's out there, look forward to Glenn actually sending pressure at those guys and trying to heat up Haynes King. But I think that with them being able to rushing only 4 or 5 guys or rushing 4, technically they don't do that very well. So you're going to have to be off schedule with, running on first down. Instead of running on first down, throw it on first down, because that's going to be the thing that you want to keep these guys on their toes, and going tempo is going to help as well. Not allowing those guys to rotate guys in, because we understand what Georgia tried to do when they're rotating guys in. So, yeah, I think that how you can expose this Georgia defense is by getting that pass game going, throwing on first down, getting the ball out of your hands, quick screens. That's a real good way of beating teams who's going to send pressure, because it's coming, because you were susceptible to it last week. So, yeah, man, I understand the type of talent that Georgia has, but they do not, I repeat, they do not have the enforcers up front like they had in the past.
Yeah, I am like so far with you, Jarvis, on this of thinking, because here's a big element of what Georgia is missing. CJ Allen. They're all-star, all league, all whatever you want to put on that man. He has been a workhorse for that Georgia defense and linebacker core, someone that they could just lean on a ton, and not having him out there is going to be a huge factor for the Georgia Bulldogs. I actually was thinking of, is this, potentially a game where a guy like Josh Beetham is just getting fed the ball over the middle, getting those tight ends involved. It's one of those.
They've kind of disappeared a little bit.
Say what?
They've disappeared a little bit as far as from a production standpoint. You haven't been able to see those guys. Oh, yeah. Hey, I forgot another wide receiver, Jordan Allen. Hey, right. Remember him? The freshman wide receiver that was balling out. You were getting the ball, get him the rock, and he was getting involved in the offense and taking it to the house, and had a big score against Boston College for you. Yeah, get him the ball too. Matter of fact, put all 4 of those guys out on the field at the same time. See what happens,
Jarvis, it's so funny how you and I are thinking similarly, because I'm thinking Jordan Allen facing against a guy like Ellis Robinson, freshman on freshman, because what are the Bulldogs seen out of Ellis Robinson so far this season? He is a guy who is going to go for making the big play, and sometimes that means getting burnt. And so getting explosive plays. How is Georgia Tech going to stay in this game and try to pull off the win? Getting some explosive plays. And so, if you're able to find those big chunk plays from a guy like Jordan Allen, your speedy receivers, I think like that's going to be such a attacking the middle of the field, where that linebacker core is going to be I think just not the same. You mentioned the pass rush not being there. Their run defense is pretty dominant. Like that's one of those.
They top 5 to be exact.
Yeah. And so I think this is a game, Jarvis, where if Haynes does have 20 runs, I won't be as concerned about it. I won't see that as much of a failure in this one than other games, just because you don't want to be running with Jamal Haynes just for the sake of running the football. You're going to do that to establish other things, but not to just be running into a wall, necessarily. So, this is a Georgia Bulldog team that's held their opponents to, I believe it's averaging like 88 yards a game this season. They are not giving up much in that run game. And so, the pass game certainly, once again, leaning heavily on Haynes King to pull this one off is going to be a big factor. When Brent Key spoke, earlier in the week, talking about the offensive line, timing is going to be crucial. So the offensive line protecting and giving not only Haynes that timing, but receivers and having their timing and not having that upset by something that you and I talked off air about that I think sometimes can be a bit confusing when a head football coach says, oh man, Pitt was push cracking our safeties. And that's, an element of how you want to establish the ball for your offense, but also have to worry about Georgia's offense and trying to slow them down.
Yeah, I think this is one of those games where you're going to have to kind of go into the archives, bring out some things that you haven't brought out in a while.
Sure.
Because of the magnitude of this game. We talk about what's at stake. You not only is this your rival, you haven't looked good for the past month. Let's just keep it a buck. Yep. And you need a good performance in order to end a season when you're just looking at it from a 30,000 foot view, just like, oh man, that Tech had a good season this year. But internally, you're like, yeah, we got off to a good start, but man, look at how we finished. And you don't want to be sitting at, as you're preparing for the Cheetos Cheez-It Bowl, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Pop-Tart Bowl.
Or whatever.com bowl or whatever, you just don't want to be in that headspace wondering what if as you're preparing for a postseason appearance. So yeah, man, I think this is one of those games where you have to say, all right, we know this team has weaknesses in this particular spot. So let me go pull up some stuff, maybe pull out some stuff that you worked on, those plays that you drew up in those 8 overtimes, like those 2-point conversions. Like let's bring that out. Let's bring all of those out because you're gonna have to pull out all the stops. Like you want Georgia to really be wondering like what the hell you doing out there, because like, man, y'all haven't done that in the last 3 games. Based off our film study, y'all haven't done that. So you want to keep them on their toes, because once they get settled in and those guys start picking up on what you're doing, that's when the talent starts to come in.
Well, for the first time in this rivalry, it's not going to be played at a home stadium. How does Mercedes-Benz Stadium change the feel of this rivalry game? College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. Tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there is absolutely nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. You've got endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use GameTime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is actually what you pay. I mean, the app is super simple. You can see your exact view from your seat before you buy them, and that's going to be an important factor, especially at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, because it's a big place, and you want to make sure that the view you're going to have from your seat is actually what you want, and you're not going to be misled, because GameTime is going to give you all of that information. It's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've personally bought tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Go download GameTime today. Jarvis, Friday is going to look quite different than what we've seen before in the history of this rivalry. I believe it's the 119th clean old-fashioned hate between the Bulldogs and the Yellow Jackets. And being at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, how do you kind of see that changing the feel of what this game is going to be?
The vibes will be different for sure, because when you think about selling out Bobby Dodd and like the history behind that, and getting all the regardless of how the game turned out, if you just look at how the stadium was, I talked to a couple of people who actually got a chance to go. I wasn't able to go because I was down in New Orleans, trying to figure out what the Falcons were doing on getting ready to do on Sunday. But I was watching it down there. But and talking with certain people, it was strong vibes. A lot of the crowd was rocking, and of course, when Tech got punched in the mouth in the first quarter, it got a little quiet, but they still were there. They still were, cheering on the team, and you still felt that, well, at least the crowd still felt, based off how they were responding to it, for the rest of that game, you could see that, they still had a little bit of hope as to they would be able to get back there. But that momentum that you built up leading up to this point is kind of lessened a little bit, because the team up 3-16, their fans are kind of used to playing the Mercedes-Benz, and there are a lot of Georgia fans here in Atlanta, so it's going to be a lot of people there in red and black. So you kind of lose that, from a standpoint of having that home field advantage. Is not going to be there. Let me just say that. It's not going to be there. However, when J-Bat decided to, take the money and run, so to speak, like literally, $10 million is $10 million. And when you think about how Ryan Alpert is handling it and saying, hey, Key, how are we going to use this? How can this help you? Or what are you going to do to, better this team with this money? How can you do that? Or what can we achieve with this money by putting it towards a team? And I'm sure I wasn't in that meeting. I wasn't in that conversation, but I know exactly what Key said. I need to give me some players. And he said it just like that.
That's the thing, Jarvis, is like getting $10 million. All right, maybe they didn't just take all 10 and put it into players, but there are going to be little elements all along the way that are going to positively impact this university. And also, as it's been pointed out by people who have written about this, there's also a situation where when J-Bat made this deal, the outlook of the program and the trajectory certainly was not viewed in quite the same positivity that it is right now.
Sure.
I don't know that they could have known necessarily how quickly Brent Key was going to be able to have the Yellow Jackets on the cusp of a week ago. We were talking about the potential of a college football playoff berth. And so for all of those reasons, when you need to bring in resources, when you hadn't seen Bobby Dodd sold out the way that they were against Pitt, on Saturday, you hadn't seen that in a while. And so for all of those reasons, it was like, all right, maybe this is the decision that we need to go with. You now have seen, though, that Ryan Alpert, who's taken over, clearly values playing at home, because that's why he moved the Tennessee game and kept it at Bobby Dodd Stadium instead of taking another payout from Mercedes-Benz to go play at the Benz. And so I think there are positive signs moving forward in this rivalry. And I'll also bring up this, Jarvis, which I think is an important factor for Yellow Jackets fans who might be upset that this game isn't getting played at Bobby Dodd. Would you like to know the last time that the Yellow Jackets won at Bobby Dodd Stadium while playing Georgia?
Ooh, it's been a while, because the last few wins have been on the road.
Yeah, 1999 was the last time the Yellow Jackets beat the Bulldogs at Bobby Dodd Stadium. Every other time since, it's been on the road. So
you know who's on that team, right?
Say what?
You know who was on that team, right?
I do. He remembers.
He's his team right
I'm
now.
sure. I'm
So,
sure.
yeah, you probably should ask him about that when you go to the press conference.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm glad you put that in my brain, because that'll
Yeah.
for sure
Yeah.
be a conversation to be
Yeah.
had. I just thought, essentially having this as a road game of sorts, because all of the conversation that I've heard, and I don't know how true it'll be until you and I are there on Friday, is that Georgia has bought more tickets to this game than Georgia Tech. I mean, I've known Tech fans in the past who straight up told me to my face, they said, "Hey, guess what? Every year I sell my Georgia Tech, or every other year, I guess, I sell those tickets because I pay for my entire year of season tickets by selling that one game." And so I wonder, once again, like how many Tech fans just not knowing what the season was going to turn into, not having the optimism, maybe took that opportunity. And so, if it does feel like an away game, I certainly don't think that's going to be a negative. I think these Yellow Jackets can handle that type of situation, because clearly it wasn't like having the sold out Bobby Dodd Stadium a week ago was some major boost. Obviously, as you get down 28-0 in that game.
Yeah, and and they like this senior class was undefeated at the Bobby Dodd. In the past 2 years, they were 10 I think 10-0 coming into the game against Pitt. So if they played well there, but that again, that Pitt game is one that we'll probably be talking about long into the offseason. Like, yeah, man, I don't know what happened in that doggone game, but I think that this is it all. Yeah, the vibe's going to be different. Sure. You had to take the money. Yep. Understood. But it all's going to boil down to what these guys do on the field. And I think that there is a way for them to do that. And we're going to talk about, dive a little bit deeper into the game, when we go into our preview tomorrow. But it's really imperative that they understand, this coaching staff understands what's at stake, because you don't want to end your season like this, losing 3 or 4 games, to end the season when you start
going 1-3 to end the year after 8-0.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to do that. That's not how you want to end a season like this, because you're talking about history being made. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Georgia Tech. Tomorrow, like Jarvis mentioned, we'll get into that final preview of this clean, old-fashioned hate game. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, anywhere you listen to podcasts, for free. Follow the show on social media, Locked On Georgia Tech, as well as Jarvis at JarvisD90. I'm at ATL Johnson 18. Thank you for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and Alex Donna break down the most interesting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championship and every game in between. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. For Locked On Georgia Tech, y'all have a good one.